So is it time to finally stop investing and instead focus on paying down our HECS debts? Official numbers released by the Australian Bureau of Statistics highlighted that the Consumer Price Index rose by 1.4% this quarter, which means that for everyone out there who has a HECS debt outstanding, you can expect your balance to increase by 7.1% this year. Now, for as long as I could remember, if anyone ever asked me whether or not they should be paying down their HECS debt early, my answer was always no. And this is because the opportunity cost of that money was always greater elsewhere. You could have taken that money and invested it into the stock market and expect to make 8% on your money instead of putting it towards paying down your HECS debt, which only ever increases in line with inflation. But now that the indexation rate is going to be at 7.1%, I think my answer to that question might change. Now, on face value, it might seem that the obvious answer is to pay down your HECS debt this year as much as possible, given that the indexation rate is going to be so high. However, the answer isn't that simple. There's actually so many moving parts to be considered when we're looking to answer that question, such as your own personal circumstances, your risk tolerances, and generally just what makes you happy. So today, I'm going to give you some pros and cons to overpaying your HECS debt versus investing. So let's get straight into the video. So the first pro to overpaying your HECS debt is the guaranteed return. Now, in the past, as I highlighted before, this decision was a lot easier to make. To put it simply, the guaranteed return that you would have received from overpaying your HECS debt was significantly lower than the expected return that you would get from investing into the stock market. This table right here shows us the indexation rate of HECS debt over the past 10 years. And we can see that for most years, it's hovered at around about 2%, if not lower. So it clearly never made any sense to pay down your HECS debt early. However, now that the indexation rate for this year will be 7.1%, that's essentially the guaranteed return that you'd make on your money from paying off your HECS debt early. And I would argue that for most people, they would take up a guaranteed return of 7% any day of the year. If you came to me with a business opportunity stating that you could guarantee me returns of 7% every single year, then I'd probably think it was some kind of scam or Ponzi scheme. Now, even if you put your money into a high interest savings account, which currently is the highest it's ever been in over a decade due to the rising interest rates, the guaranteed return that you'd receive there is only 5%. And then after taking into account taxes, you're probably looking at around 3 to 4% return. The other alternative that we've talked about is obviously putting it into the stock market. And traditionally, the stock market has returned on average around 8% per year after accounting for inflation. However, with how turbulent the market has been over the past 1 to 2 years, there's no guarantee that the market will provide similar returns for the foreseeable future. And in fact, many people are expecting a recession instead. So with so much uncertainty in the market this year, guaranteeing yourself a return of 7.1% this year sounds like a pretty big win for me. Now, the next pro is that it can significantly increase your borrowing power if you are currently looking to buy property. So if you've ever applied for a home loan, banks will typically treat your HECS debt in the same way as they would your other personal liabilities, such as your credit card, your personal loans, and any car loans as well. Now, every lender has their own methods in calculating how much you can safely borrow. However, one unanimous metric to look out for is your DTI, which is your debt to income ratio. Your DTI is calculated by taking all of your debts divided by your annual income. Okay, so here's a quick example. Let's say you wanted to apply for a home loan for $500,000 and you had some existing debt which included a credit card debt of $2,000, a car loan of $10,000, and your HECS debt of $40,000. And each year you make $100,000. And to calculate your debt to income ratio, all we would do is sum up all of your existing debts and how much debt you're looking to take on, and then divide that by your annual income. So in this example, we have a debt to income ratio of 5.52. Lenders will look at this number as a way of determining your serviceability. That is, can you make your mortgage repayments without falling into financial stress? Now, as a general rule of thumb, low low, medium, and high debt to income ratios look something like this. And obviously you want to have as low of a ratio as possible, which is why paying off your HECS debt early can significantly increase your borrowing power. Now, the last benefit is the psychological benefit. Now, getting yourself to a point where you're actually debt-free can create, for a lot of people, a sense of freedom in their lives, which ultimately is quite hard to quantify that value. My girlfriend has a pretty sizable HECS debt because she did a double degree, and she's pretty concerned and feels like she'll never be able to pay it off. And that's why you see a lot of videos on YouTube or articles talking about students who have paid off their student loans. Because it's definitely a big deal for these people, and in all of these videos and articles you can see just how happy and relieved they are. And even though our HECS debt is quite different to student loans in the United States, simply due to the fact that ours only ever increases in line with inflation, I think that psychologically for everyone out there, everyone would feel a massive relief or weight removed from their shoulders if they were to finally pay off all of their HECS debt. Okay, so the first con to paying off your HECS debt early is that it is more than likely that inflation will not remain this high moving forward. Interest rates have risen significantly over the past year, but it typically takes several months for the impact of those rate rises to impact the economy because of what is called monetary lag. But we are starting to finally see these rate rises impact the economy, with inflation peaking at 7.8% back in December, with this quarter being the first time it's fallen. So whilst the indexation rate is extremely high this year, it will more than likely be lower next year. And who knows, by the time it's 2025 or 2026, we could see inflation come back down to around about 2%. So another way of looking at this con is looking at the opportunity cost in the outer years of paying off your HECS debt and not just looking at this year specifically. So if you made extra repayments this year, you'd be making a guaranteed return of 7.1%, which is great. However, in the outer years, as inflation comes down, your guaranteed return will fall, and it could fall to as low as around 2% once inflation gets under control, which isn't that great when we could have put that money elsewhere and made a higher return on our money. Now, a reason towards continuing to invest over paying down your HECS debt is that so you can continue to let your money compound. Now, the term compound interest refers to the interest that you earn on your own interest. Now, that sounds a little bit complex, but let me explain briefly with an example. So let's say you invested $1,000 and you get a 10% return. Now at the end of the year, you're going to have $1,100. Now when you start that next year, if you get another 10% return on your $1,100, then you'll end up with $1,210. And I'll pretend that this pattern continues for another 20 years. Your money will continue to earn money on the previous balance every single year. So at the end of year 20, you're going to have $6,727. So essentially what that means is that the benefit from investing now in the outer years will more than make up for and outweigh the guaranteed return that you'd make from paying down your HECS debt early this year. And the final con is that your money is probably better off in your offset. Now this con only really applies to people who have mortgages. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the HECS indexation rate this year is definitely extremely high, but is more than likely just an anomaly. Mortgage rates have traditionally been always higher than interest rates, and for good reason. So it's a very similar concept to the previous argument, except this time you just put that money towards paying down your principal early or just parking it in your offset account. You'll be paying off your interest rate for X number of years moving forward, which would ultimately outweigh any benefit that you would receive from overpaying your HECS debt this year. Putting your money into an offset account is definitely much less riskier than investing into the stock market, so it really just comes down to your own risk tolerances. So there you have it, some of the pros and cons to paying down your HECS debt early. So on face value, it might have seemed like a logical answer to just pay down our HECS debt this year. However, when we look at things from a longer term view and also take into account all of our own personal circumstances and risk appetites, it's a much harder question to answer. Nevertheless, whether or not you pay down your HECS debt early this year is up to you and your own personal circumstances. Let me know what you guys are planning to do this year. Are you going to pay down your HECS debt early, or just continue to put that money towards other investments. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button down below. Share this to someone else who's currently on the fence of whether or not they should be paying off their HECS debt. And quick tip, if you are looking to pay down your HECS debt, make sure you make the payment by at least the end of May to ensure that it kind of carries over before the indexation happens. Stay safe, guys, and I will see you guys in the next video.